we tried to stay true to both our heritage as well as modernize what that heritage means for the evolving customer.
Welcome to Marketing Conversations with Lamphouse Films, where we give you access to tips and insights from today's marketing thought leaders. Marketing is such a big part of today's world, and at Lamphouse, we think that how we do it really matters. That's why we create the ads the way we do, and that's why we produce this show. Today, I'm talking to Dipti Kachru, the Chief Marketing Officer at J.P. Morgan U.S. Wealth Management. Make sure to click the link in the description to get more marketing content right in your inbox. When did you start working in marketing? It seems like you've had an interesting tenure.
Longer than I'd like to admit. But yeah, it's about a 20-year tenure now.
So of all of the career paths, what drew you to marketing?
I think it was the sort of confluence of sort of art and science and business together. So there was an element of really understanding consumer behavior and psychology. There was an element of making an impact on sort of the business side of things in the role marketing plays, and then just the creativity that sort of stemmed through it, right? This idea of building brands that live forever was sort of what hooked me in early in my career.
Yeah, I think I talk to marketers sometimes who don't appreciate the art side of it, or I talk to artists who work in the space who don't appreciate the marketing side. And I'm like, it is the fusion of both of them that makes this job so interesting.
It is, and that's what I love about it, right? Because it's multidimensional, and you use different sides of your brain, and there's sort of incredible creativity. And now even more so over the years, there's so much science to the decisioning that you make sort of upfront when you're building something, or how you measure it, or how you tweak it and optimize it. So it's this sort of left brain, right brain magic coming together that actually is the fun part.
Yeah, how much is that science? Like how closely are you guys studying that? I know different businesses are sort of like a different range of like gut instinct for what we feel like is right, and versus like we're really, really by the book. I work with a lot of financial institutions. It seems like they tend to be the latter.
You're right. I think you see a lot more use of science, especially now in modern marketing, as you sort of think about scale. Like science helps play a role in sort of validating some of the instincts you have, sometimes measuring it on the other end. But yeah, there's a lot more science than most people realize. Science and data analytics, machine learning to be able to guide to better decisions on behalf of the client, so we can better serve them, make it more relevant. It's incredible. I love the science part as much as I love the art part, and that's what makes it fun.
And the data is so fast now. That's the thing that I feel like is, I'm sure, different even in the past 2 years, that is like, you just know what's working and what's not working instantly.
That's right. There's an immediacy sort of what data tells you. Also, if you think about it, right, like today we as J.P. Morgan Chase Bank with over 60 million customers. And, it's what they're transacting on their card. It's what their behaviors are with their money. We have the benefit of having that data, and that data to better serve them, to make our products work better for them, to sort of meet them where they are in their journey. I think that's what the power of data can do at scale for you.
Now, I feel like where data is maybe like less of a clear guide is with branding. And it's interesting that you mentioned branding is sort of like your thing. And so are there data points that you're analyzing to figure out those things as well?
There are. So listen, I think branding has sort of the creativity associated with it, right? Which is deeply understanding how people think, what they feel, where the emotions fit in, and then making that connection, sort of capturing hearts and minds. But data comes in how we track sort of the impact of brand, how people feel towards certain attributes of the brand. Are you moving the needle? Are you not? So I think data has an important role to play in helping you establishing a strong foundation, and then sort of tracking how that foundation is doing over a period of time.
One thing that is interesting about your career path is you started at organizations like Pepsi, ESPN, Cadbury, and now you've worked in financial institutions for a little while. And one thing that we're thinking about as we're developing campaigns and for ourselves is it seems like most of the marketing advice that is out there in the public is talking about how to sell something that costs $3, $4, $5, and that you're transacting all the time. But now on this financial institution side, you're working in a space where like where people are going to put their money, they maybe make that decision and change that decision. I mean, you got the data, maybe 2 times, 3 times in a lifetime.
Yep.
So how different is that selling cycle, and how different is the way that you're approaching your communications?
Yeah, I think, listen, there's a couple of things. There's the principles of marketing don't change, right? In being able to understand the customer behavior, in understanding the purchase cycle, the journey, and yes, in some cases there's an immediacy to the buying process, and in some cases there's a, I think in marketing language, they sort of call it a longer consideration cycle versus a shorter consideration cycle, and what that means and how you build marketing programs. And it's the same, I started my sort of marketing journey on the agency side, working on the brands you mentioned, which was fantastic. And, I always joke that no marketer wakes up and says, I want to be in financial services. You want to go work on Pepsi and you want to go work on some of these cool brands. But having now lived this journey, I think the magic is there's so much sort of human emotion in the decisions people make with money, right? When you think about what people deeply, deeply care about and what sort of their, driver of existence is health and wealth. And so the wealth side of it and your relationship with money is important in the decisions you make. So yes, there's the principles of customer behavior and managing that journey and watching it and being able to sort of intercept it on behalf of the customer at the right time are all the same. What that looks like in financial services, especially wealth management, is very different. What makes people buy a checking account, right? Or open a self-directed account, or decide to give a large part of their wealth to a financial advisor for a long period of time as they think about retirement is all very different. And we build our marketing programs based on exactly sort of those journeys. Some require more patience and tenacity and being able to sort of build the brand, build consideration, and then show up in the hearts and the minds of the customers when they're ready to make a change, or give them a reason to make a change.
So where are you guys doing that primarily? Is it through email campaigns, through TV ad spend? Are you guys using social heavily at this point? Where are your primary places?
All of the above, right, Josh? I think the days of a single-minded channel and being able to achieve a marketing goal are gone. Again, where science comes in is how you use the channels to sort of drive particular actions. There's places where you require richer storytelling, right? When you're trying to sort of establish a connection with a customer, video, which primarily would be broadcast back in the day, now is addressable and online video. So there's a role for video in the storytelling aspect of building sort of that bond and bringing sort of the purpose of the brand through. But then there's more below the line, bottom funnel activations where you're driving a particular action, where if the action is a digital account opening, then you're using digital as your way to sort of bring the customer into the journey. For us, when we think about channels, it's not just sort of the paid channels. One of our big benefits is as Chase, we have millions of customers who are operating into our own ecosystem. How we use that ecosystem to sort of guide them in the right direction of what the next best product might be for them, or how they can make better decisions with their money is sort of part of the book of work that we do.
Yeah. So how much of your attention is spent in new customer acquisition versus getting the customers that are already in the ecosystem to different places in the ecosystem?
It really depends on the product, right? We, as J.P. Morgan Wealth Management, we offer a suite of products. In some cases, we know that the opportunity is with our own customer base, potentially customers who have a banking relationship with us or a credit card relationship with us, to sort of do a better job of helping them understand what we bring to their lives when you think about investing in wealth management. In other cases, it's folks who don't have a relationship with us on the banking or credit card side, where we're talking to them outside in sort of the broader channels.
Are you guys developing separate creative for both of those areas?
We are, right, to do it right in the world of sort of really singular personalization and really tackling exactly what drives action in the hearts and the minds of customers. We are in some cases, right, where we're using certain channels to, like I said, drive more broader based awareness. In some channels where we know the customer already sort of has a relationship with us, then it's a slightly different dialogue. So yeah, there's shared creative in places that works, and in some very specific channels there's distinct creative, because customers want to be acknowledged for how much we know about them, right? I think that's now become an expectation, not just from financial services but anyone. you're expecting, whether you're shopping on Amazon or you're in the Chase system, what we hear customers tell us is, me, tell me what, make it easy for me. Give me a short list of things I should be doing rather than me having to dig that information out.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people like to complain about, companies knowing things about them. But then also when I get an ad for like a service at a company that I'm already using, I'm also frustrated by that. I'm like, you should already know that I have Disney Plus. Like, why are you giving me this? Like, try to sell me a specific show or something. I don't know.
No, you listen. You're right. Step one is to do what's right by the customer's choice of privacy. Right. Step one is to do that, which is, if we have the permission to be able to sort of serve the customer, we do it, and we do it well. And if we don't, we sort of honor that. So step one is sort of to respect the bounds of privacy that the customer has established and listen to that. I think the next step is, you're right, in that value chain, we are hearing more and more customers say, you know me, I expect you to be more relevant. And you have to do that without being creepy.
Yeah, that's the fine line. Because I think I've always seen this as a benefit of like, oh, we have more information on customers, we can sort of reach them in these new ways. But the volume of creative that is necessary now is, it's humongous. So how are you managing that pipeline of all of these different, not only different platforms that expect to see different things, but different variations of how much you know about the customer?
It's aggressive test and learn, right? And I will say, it's not like we've reached that end design state. We're learning our way through it, and you don't want to overcomplicate the customer journey either. And so I think it sort of steps into saying sort of broad relevancy messages, and then there's moments in time where we believe that we can deliver additional value based on what we know about the customer. And those are the moments where we, sort of leaning in a little bit more to be more custom. The other place customization sort of comes into play is once you onboard a client. They're a client of yours now. They're expecting to be served with excellence, and serving our clients with excellence in that sort of customer journey. If you think about, the role we play as wealth managers in educating our clients on making better decisions with their money, what, the markets mean for them, what retirement planning should mean for them, the more we can make that relevant for the customer, sort of the deeper the engagement and affinity with our relationship is. And that's the other place, outside of pure acquisition, where we bring personalization in the right way.
Do you guys see that your the success with your ads is increased with your increased customization toward the customers?
For sure, right? I think, again, like, as consumers ourselves, relevancy matters. It is a little bit of that final frontier, and again, like I said, we're not quite there yet. In a way, you can say Amazon or Target is, but it's certainly the intent, and it requires an incredible architecture of data and other capabilities to be able to deliver that at scale. So we're in the early days of being able to establish that sense of relevancy, but I think it certainly shows up. The more relevant it is, the more we see performance increase as a marketer.
So you guys made a pretty big decision a year ago when you created this new brand. Is that how you would refer to it?
Yeah, I would say, listen, we're a branded house in that we have two master brands of Chase and J.P. Morgan, and they both mean different things to the customers we serve across sort of the continuum of the customer. J.P. Morgan Wealth Management is a sub brand. It represents our business, and yeah, I think you're sort of pointing to the decision to launch the J.P. Morgan Wealth Management brand, which was last year.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people spend time thinking about, where you're trying to create a cohesive brand, but you're also trying to create custom experiences for people. And so I don't know how involved you were in the decision-making process, or if you were just sort of given the job of like making it happen, but tell me a little bit about that. Like, why break it out into its own thing rather than leaving it under the umbrella? How do you know when it's time to do that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and no, I was fortunate enough to be sort of part of that journey in the decision making and what we did, and for us there was a couple of things, right? Like we have the benefit of two master brands in J.P. Morgan Chase, both with incredible strengths in what they represent in the hearts and minds of customers. The work we are doing is to make sure that our customers also understand that we're more than a consumer bank, or we're more than a credit card shop, or we're more than sort of an investment bank, and bringing through the orientation of wealth management to the name was important because you want to make it simple for people to understand what you offer and what you're buying. And so leaning into the equity of JP Morgan that represents sort of this deep expertise, and then the clear description of what business we're in, which is wealth management, what was the driver of doing so. And in that, we sort of collapsed a couple of sort of other sub-brands that sort of existed or in the process of doing that purely for simplification, as well as sort of clarity, right? There's shared DNA that exists, and this is sort of where you sort of make the decision of branded house or house of brands, which is, are you speaking to clients across a continuum of products that share sort of the same purpose? And if there is the same purpose, which in our case is to help our clients make the best of their money, then sort of having a common brand with shared DNA matters and helps reinforce that purpose. It's clarity and value proposition. It is efficient as a marketer in bringing it to market and investing in that brand and storytelling that you need to do to invest in it, versus, a Procter and Gamble where you're operating in a vast set of categories with various segments and different drivers of choice, where it would be a disservice to the branding process to expect one brand to represent everything. And that's where I think the branded house the house of brands starts to make more sense.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really great example where, yeah, it's not necessarily the same customer and they don't have the same expectations, but it's still, I mean, in your instance, it is the same customer, at least in theory. They have, I guess, a similar core purpose, but it is, a subset of customers who are interested in this. So, yeah, how did you guys come to the decision to, not just call it another service under JP Morgan Chase, but to create its own identity? And are you guys creating advertising and assets just over here that aren't really touching the rest of the brand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a waterfall, right? The brand, the sub brand of JP Morgan Wealth Management sort of is anchored to the master brand of JP Morgan. So it wasn't us waking up and saying, we're going to start with a white, sheet of paper and sketch this out for ourselves. It was to understand what in the equity of the master brand we pull through specifically in the business and what we offer our clients. By the way, like start with the client and what does the client need? And again, we're not talking about just one client segment. We serve a breadth of clients. We're in different places in their affluence, in different places in their journey of growth and complexity of their needs. So the starting point was to understand sort of the DNA of the master brands and what we're pulling through as part of purpose and part of sort of just the identity, right? When you think about simple things like logo and color and visual identity of brands. So pulling that in was, I think, the starting point. Then redimensionalizing it, right? You have to sort of look at it internally. You've got to look at it from the point of the client, but you also have to look at it from the point of the competitive space. How does your brand show up in the category? Is it distinct enough? Is there clarity in who you are and what you bring to the market? So you sort of look at it in that context, and that's sort of when you start to build the foundations of the brand. So it stems from the master brand, and then sort of takes on a little bit of its own DNA to be able to represent the category that we're in, which is different than consumer banking, but deeply, deeply connected and integrated.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure you're benefiting a lot from the branding that they're doing. If they're, running a campaign, even if it's not talking about your thing, I'm sure you're seeing spikes and all of that. So what were the priorities as you embarked? I mean, this was a huge job. How long were you working on this, by the way?
I would say about, we've been thinking about it for over a year and talking about sort of the strategic decisioning around sort of, is it one brand, is it multiple brands, is it, we've sort of worked through that, but the actual work from start to finish was about a 6 to 8 month window from where we sort of kicked it off in earnest, and we sort of built out sort of that brand foot. I would say like the strategy, the identity itself, and then bringing it to market. And the part of your earlier question I didn't answer is, are we going to sort of have a campaign very specifically for wealth management? The answer is yes. We're working on it right now, and we hope to have it in market in a couple of months. But we'll certainly, again, it's in close sync with everything else we do at J.P. Morgan and Chase. So the customer, again, very often we're talking to the same customer. We need to make sure and be very intentional about the connectivity our message has to everything else, so it comes from the same place. But certainly, sort of the part of your brain that we're wanting to sort of poke at a little bit when you think about the long-term role of what your money needs to do and how you're going to grow it and how you're going to sort of fulfill some of those financial goals is a little different than some of the transactional decisions you're going to be making today.
Yeah. So if you were talking to somebody else who's sort of at the beginning of this, of this process of creating this brand that is related, what were some of the big things that you learned along the way, and what would you say your primary goals were going into this? What were some things that you were thinking, this will be successful if we're able to?
Yep. No, good question. Listen, there's a few principles that we always begin with, right? Which is, what problem are you trying to solve? Like having a very clear orientation to what problem you're trying to solve as a business is one very critical data point that feeds into sort of what the outcome is. And if you get that question wrong, you likely will, your answer at the other end will be wrong. The second one, which is I think the heart and soul of it, is sort of, who is the customer and what do they need? Right? Like we spend more time than most can imagine in understanding sort of the customer insight, not just as a large base of 20, 30 million people, but as you start thinking about the segments and the drivers of behavior and affinity and association that each of these segments have, like being able to mine that information gives you a rich starting point of how do you start to build context around sort of what the brand needs to do. And like I said, the third is sort of really thinking about the category, which is, what's the category done right and wrong? What's worked? What hasn't worked? We see in wealth management, it's an incredibly cliched category. Like, most organizations look the same. And so in doing the work and laying the foundation, we spent a lot of time thinking about what is authentic to us. You've got to be authentic, right? What solves the problem for the business? What represents the need of the customer? And then how do we make sure we can sort of bring this new brand into an ecosystem where it can stand on its own and feel a little distinct?
Yeah, are you guys, because I think is the other big trend in marketing. There's there's all of these different places that we have to be thinking about, and customization, but I think a lot of people get lost in that and sort of how interesting that is, and forget that, like, you have to be speaking truthfully about who you are too. And it's interesting that you say that, because I direct a lot of commercials for financial institutions, and there is this monotony that you see in the marketplace where they all sort of are doing the same thing. So as you guys were doing this, how much were you thinking about, like, we need to stay true to who we are, but we need to be different than everybody else?
A lot more. We spend a lot of hours just sort of even debating that amongst ourselves, because and again, like, the being true to our DNA, right? We're a 150-year-old brand. If you think about J.P. Morgan, with incredible heritage, and we're operating in a place where we're working with similar sort of brand stewards. If you think about the Schwabs and the Fidelities who've been along for the ride for a really long time. And we're sort of talking to clients who are also interacting with the fintechs, right? Which are sort of cooler, newer, you have a different brand identity and personality. And there was a lot of sort of movement of, do we want to seem more traditional? Do we want to be more sort of fintechy? And you always have to sort of look back and say, like, who are we, and can we authentically, who can we authentically be? So I think in how we brought the brand to life, we tried to stay true to both our heritage as well as modernize what that heritage means for the evolving customer.
Thanks for watching another episode of Marketing Conversations with Lamphouse Films. I hope you learned as much as I did from this conversation. As you probably know, we reserve bonus content for our mailing list subscribers, so make sure to click the link in the description to join the list today.